government spent $100 million turning him into the perfect super soldier. He fought for 40 years. Then they executed him and threw his body out with the trash. Here is what happened. The military had a program called Project Atom. They took infants straight from civilian families and started conditioning them from day one. At 5 years old, the children were made to watch predators tear each other apart. By 12, the training was brutal, with kids running until their legs collapsed under them. Any child who fell behind was executed on the spot in front of the others. No empathy, no hesitation, just obedience and killing. If the target turned out to be an unarmed hostage, they fired anyway. The survivors lost their names and got numbers branded onto their faces. By the time they passed final testing, they were not soldiers anymore. They were weapons with a heartbeat, and the system worked. For decades, these men dominated every battlefield they touched, from Earth all the way into deep space. They were always sent in first, and the fact that they did not care whether they died made the impossible look routine. Their only reward was another scar, another tattoo, another victory nobody would remember. The best of them was Todd, the highest-ranked soldier the program ever produced, the military's greatest weapon. This is Soldier.
Soldier.
Then a new officer arrived with a squad of gene-modified replacements. Younger, stronger, engineered specifically to make the old veterans obsolete. The commander did not bother arguing about it. He ordered a live test right there. The new soldiers outshot the veterans, then buried them in the endurance run. One of them started a full 20 minutes late and still finished ahead of Todd. To make it interesting, the officer put 2 more veterans in against a single gene soldier, 3 against 1, and it still was not close. The prototype took them apart one at a time, kicked an exhausted Todd off a rope bridge, and threw the other 2 into the air. One died on impact. The other got tangled in chains and blacked out. Todd fought back with everything he had left and managed to blind the gene soldier in one eye. That enraged the officer, who was furious that a bunch of washed-up veterans had damaged his expensive new toy. He shot the last surviving veteran, then had all 3 bodies loaded onto a garbage hauler and dumped on a remote waste planet. Todd woke up buried in industrial wreckage, barely breathing, drifting inside the cargo hold. He tried to pull himself free, lost his grip, and the entire load of trash dumped out onto a barren red planet with him inside it. And for the first time in his life, something crossed his face. Anger. The planet had 3 suns, endless red dust storms, and looked completely dead. A hurricane almost tore Todd off the ground before he grabbed a heavy chain and held on. When the storm passed, he followed that chain and found a settlement built into the rocks. Every instinct told him to scout it first. He slipped inside without being seen, moving through the shadows, staying low. Then a gust of wind knocked him into the open, right in front of a group of children. The adults panicked at the sight of a soldier who had crash-landed next to their home. A heavy-set man named Mace swept the perimeter and confirmed there was no ship and no backup. The settlement leader overruled the others and decided to let Todd stay. A woman named Sandra brought him water, nervous but willing to help him anyway. When Todd wandered into a family's quarters while they were eating, the parents froze. But their son handed him half of his own meal without thinking twice. Then Todd learned the truth about these people. Every single one of them was a war refugee, hiding from the exact military he had served his whole life. They had lost their families to soldiers just like him and escaped on garbage ships to survive. And Todd remembered them. All of them, every person he had killed without question, never once wondering who they left behind. So he started working. He helped with the crops and learned how to build instead of destroy. When he pulled Sandra out of a spinning grinder, someone thanked him for the first time in his life. His face was still stone cold, but the fear in their eyes was gone, because now they understood what had been done to him. The problem was that their smiling faces kept dragging him back into flashes of blood and slaughter. He was terrified he would hurt someone, so he ran out of the hall and started pounding on a metal drum, trying to beat the violence out of himself, drowning in memories of everyone he had killed. Old men, women, children. In the middle of that, he saw a figure rushing at him, and his training took over. He grabbed the man and slammed him down beside the gears, seconds away from crushing him. It was Mason screaming, and that scream was the only thing that snapped Todd out of it. But what really turned the settlement against him was a misunderstanding. Mace's son had been bitten by a snake and lost his voice. Todd picked up a boot to show the boy how to kill a snake, how to protect himself. Mace and his wife walked in at exactly the wrong moment and saw a trained killer standing over their child. Convinced he meant harm, the settlers gathered in the hall and voted to throw him out. Before he left, Todd took one long look at the boy and the family. He said nothing. He walked out into the wasteland. What none of them knew was that something big enough to wipe out the entire planet was already on its way. Colonel Macomb was a second-generation officer who had been handed his rank and was desperate for a win to prove himself. He picked this garbage planet as a live-fire training ground for his gene soldiers. It made no difference to him whether anyone lived there. In his file, these people were listed as missing persons, names already scrubbed from the records. Perfect target practice. Meanwhile, Mace finally realized how badly he had misjudged Todd, and the guilt pushed him out into the sandstorm to find him. At the end of the chain, a massive warship roared overhead. Mace started waving for help until Todd grabbed his arm and stopped him. And then Todd spoke out loud for the first time. The hatch dropped. A heavy armored vehicle rolled out, followed by the gene soldiers filing out one by one. They formed perfect ranks and marched straight toward the settlement, where the panic had already started. Nobody knew if that ship meant rescue or death. Todd and Mace ran along the cable back toward camp, but the armored car was faster, and the man driving it was Kane 607, the same gene soldier Todd had blinded. He did not care who was in front of him. His orders were simple: kill everyone. A shell hit dead on and tore Mace's leg off. Todd dragged him into the flames, using the heat to hide them from the vehicle's thermal scanners. Mace knew he was finished, and with the last of his strength, he begged Todd to protect his wife and son. Todd took it like an order, though he had already decided that on his own. The settlement leader climbed the wall to demand answers, and a rocket blew the wall apart in response. The settlers grabbed what weapons they had, but hunting rifles against military gene soldiers was never a fight. They were shattered in seconds and forced to run. 3 gene soldiers pushed into camp and started executing survivors. Only 3, because Kane assumed that was all it would take. That arrogance was exactly what Todd had been waiting for. He dropped on them from above and killed the first with a knife. As strong as they were, they still bled and they still died. And because they had never seen real combat, Todd cut through them like paper. The last one panicked after watching his teammates go down and just emptied his Gatling gun in every direction. When the ammo ran out, he stood in the open reloading like an idiot, and Todd put a rocket through him. 3 dead soldiers set off the alarms. Meckham's second-in-command suggested they just carpet bomb the area and be done with it, and the colonel agreed instantly. But Todd was not going to give him the time. After 40 years in the field, Todd knew every move they were going to make before they made it. He set his ambush along the only route the armored column could take and started picking them off from range. 2 more went down before they even understood what was happening. Frustrated, Macomb ordered his elite troops to spread out and hunt him. So the soldiers dismounted and split up, walking into a maze of twisted scrap metal. The moment they stepped inside, they were already dead. One of them leaned out and Todd grabbed his rifle barrel, yanked him off a ledge, and dropped him into a pit of snakes. The screaming carried through the night, enough to shake soldiers who were engineered not to feel fear. 3 more waded into a flooded stretch, and the second they separated, Todd took one down. The other 2 grabbed flamethrowers and torched the water for 2.5 minutes. Sure, they had cooked him out. Then he came up from under the surface and killed them both. That gave away his position, and the rest swarmed in, straight into a bigger trap. Gunfire ripped into them from behind and dropped 2 more. The survivors charged toward the source and found nothing but one of their own dead men propped up as a decoy, right before a massive blast leveled them. Their squad fell apart piece by piece, and not one of them ever laid eyes on him. Soldiers built without fear were suddenly too scared to move, and Todd was not finished. He climbed onto the armored truck, took out both gunners, and ripped the hatch open. Back at the settlement, the shelling was flattening everything. Civilians too slow to run were cut down where they stood. Kane 607 fired shell after shell and ordered the lead tank to cover him. What he missed was that the tank was already barreling straight at him, crushing 2 of his own men who could not get clear. The 2 machines collided and exploded, and just like that, the gene soldiers were wiped out. Meckham could not accept the loss and completely snapped. If he could not win on the ground, he would simply erase the entire planet from orbit. He never considered that his own rage would be the thing that killed him. Kane 607, though, had survived the blast. He pumped himself full of combat stimulants, swallowed an entire bottle of pills, tracked Todd down, and forced the fight to the end. On pure power, Kane had him beat. After a few hits, Todd was on the defensive and stayed there. Kane held nothing back, but Todd kept dragging himself back to his feet. Then came the turn. As Kane moved in to finish it, Todd hit the old eye wound, snapped his arm, and drove a hammer fist down that sent him flying. He finished him without a shred of mercy. That had been his very first lesson after all. No mercy for the enemy. Up on the ship, the veterans had already begun the nuclear countdown until they spotted a handful of surviving civilians, with Todd standing among them. He had been the captain they respected above everyone else, and one look was enough to bring them back in line. When their new captain tried to stop them, they shot him, and as he screamed at the pilot to run, a veteran dragged him over to Todd. Only then did he realize who he had been fighting. Macomb completely lost it. The arrogant colonel was so terrified he wet himself. In the end, they got exactly what they had built. 14 seconds to detonation, and the man could not even remember the password he had set himself. Then the whole planet went up in a single blinding flash. Todd took the ship out into open space and set a new course, and as the wreckage disappeared behind them, he and his new family finally started a life of their own. So the moral of the story is, if you fire your most experienced employee and replace him with cheaper upgrades, don't be surprised when he turns your entire company into a resignation letter.